Hello, I'm David LaFazia. I'm here to talk to you about reaching for your goals. And we're going to do that by pulling some tools out that we learn from physics. So here's my physics toolbox. I want to ask you first, out of all these objects, a block of wood, a spring, a rope, even a fire alarm, which one of these objects best describes you? Think about it. And what makes you say it? Wood is pretty dense, but can be shaped easily into useful designs. Ropes handle lots of tension typically, and they also provide a connection between people or objects. Springs are loosey-goosey or resilient, but they easily get bent out of shape if stretched too far out of their comfort zone. Fire alarms are pretty quiet most of the time, but when they have something to say, people listen. It's these types of concepts that help us to draw relationships between physics principles, which really just describes the world around us, and our own internal and external tensions. So when we reach for goals, this means that this is something that's not already attained, something we don't already have, something that we haven't already done or accomplished. I want you to think about this in terms of achieving some goal that will improve your life and or the lives of those around you, or maybe even further than that. A lot of times we have forces at work, both internally and externally, that speed us up, slow us down, even make us change direction. Sometimes these are very positive changes. But we're going to take a look at the discipline within physics known as force and motion. Then we'll look at a few other topics. So let's really pull out our main tools for the day. One's this idea of tension. Typically, again, we look at ropes attached to something and you pull on it, and you expect there to be some type of tension in there. Imagine that you're the rope and you feel this stretch all the time. You've heard of tension headaches before that involve muscles, and you hear about maybe societal tensions involved. The whole point is that there's some force that is causing something to try to stretch, but it really isn't made to stretch. So if you're caught between two issues, then this tension is like a push me, pull you. It's moving one person in one direction, one person in the other direction. And there's so much that goes on here. And this can be a very positive thing in some ways, but typically tensions don't go away on their own. They have to be addressed somehow. So let's think about that. We also have friction at work all the time. If you know anything about friction, it's occurring when two objects are in contact, and on a very small scale, in a very small way, they become one. And this is a type of bonding. And so typically with friction, you want to be able to move things, and friction's working against that. Now, of course, friction also has some very big positives there. You can use it to gain the opportunity to move forward as well. Think about what life would be like if you didn't have friction. Not a very fun place. Now, what about this idea of elasticity? We'll talk about it again a little bit later, but I want you to think about this as resiliency. So how resilient are you? Are you able to take hits from the world, take hits from life, and still come back? Are you able to keep moving forward or not get too bent out of shape when you meet with disappointments or failures? The best teacher in your life is your failure, right? But you have to be resilient. You have to be able to take that failure and keep moving forward. Learn from it. Now, talking about moving forward is this whole overarching concept of inertia. A lot of folks, they wake up in the morning and they have what I call morning inertia. They have this tendency to just sit there and they don't want to move forward. They won't want to get out of bed. They don't want to get moving. They don't really want to start the day, which the day is the whole part of living, right? We don't live in the night, we sleep in the night. So you don't want to face life. You don't want to get out of bed and keep moving forward. Or maybe you have a job to do and you don't want to get the task started. You don't know where to start maybe. This is inertia. This is the tendency to not change your motion. It's really bad when you're sitting still first. Now, there's a whole other group of folks that once they do get moving, they don't know how to change direction, or they don't know how to slow down, assess, and revise. So we've got to make sure that we're aware of our inertia. We're aware of our tendency to either not get started or not change direction once we're moving, or not slow down and assess, and try to change this in our lives as much as possible. Inertia is a great concept. What about leverage, sometimes called leverage? We got mechanical advantage here. The whole point is sometimes you're just not strong enough to complete a task on your own. Sometimes you got to find the right tool to give you the leverage to get things done. It's almost a way of amplifying your force. What are the tools, the levers that you can employ in life to move those mountains? We talk about work in physics as some force multiplied by, mathematically, a displacement. Now, the funny thing about displacement is it's not really distance. It's distance with some direction. And the whole point that I try to make with work is that if you end back up where you started, you have zero displacement. You've not really moved anywhere overall. The analogy would be if you type up this huge, big, long report and then you erase it, you never turn it in. You've expended a lot of energy, but you've done no actual work. You haven't gone anywhere with your energy. Speaking of energy, power is energy expended over a period of time, but even better, it's work completed over a period of time. You might be expending a whole lot of energy and you feel powerful. You feel like you're a mover and you're getting something done. But if you are not actually doing any work, guess what? It's not so dynamic. Efficiency is a huge part of all of our lives. Actually, it's inefficiency, right? I want you to start thinking about your areas of inefficiencies. Where are some waste sources in your life? Can you identify one source of waste of effort in your life from just even this past week? Maybe there's some process that you do all the time and you could do it better. You could do it more efficiently. You could have less waste at the end of it. One of my pet topics is this idea of thinking in extremes. It's a strategy of mine, and scientists use this all the time. Basically, in terms of reaching for your goals, you look at what's the best case scenario, what's the best outcome I can get from this process, and what's the worst case scenario. Mathematically, we would say, what happens if we make this number very large, and what happens if we make it very small? And so we look to extremes in one direction or the other. This is a really good strategy on making decisions and looking at costs versus benefits. So keep it in your arsenal. Now, I love to talk about rate of change. For our purposes, let's just consider this slope on a graph, right? There's a lot of folks that they go very far in a very short period of time. And time absolutely is a huge part of our life. Again, we live for the day, we don't live for the night when we're sleeping. And time is extremely important. We have deadlines, we have events, we have even rites of passage, right? But when we're talking about achieving goals and completing tasks, sometimes you need to make sure that you have enough time to assess where you're going and make lane changes and make course corrections along the way. So you don't necessarily want to have the steepest slope all the time. You should divide up your tasks into small, manageable chunks. Don't try to get it all done in one big linear fit. Move along in segments. And then some tasks, okay, I got this little item, I got to do this real quickly. Sure, no problem. I'll be efficient. And then maybe you'll be more efficient and less wasteful if you take your time on the next section of the task. All right, so think about this. Don't just be the kind of person that you think you're getting life done. You think you're reaching for your goals by moving fast all the time. Take time to reflect. Take time to really assess Am I getting anywhere? Looking back at friction, am I spinning my wheels? Am I really moving forward? So what do you want to do? What are your goals? Are they personal, social, professional? What goals do you have? And then you say, how do you move forward with your goals? You define them, and now you've got to get moving. And here's where I pull in this tool called traction. So traction is not friction. Friction is, again, where you have these two surfaces interacting, and they're bonding in a small way. Traction is when you get a grip. Traction is when you dig deep in to the surface and you're going to move forward. You're really pushing into that surface. It's like the monster truck versus the race car truck, right? The tires are hugely different and they serve different purposes. Sometimes you just got to dig in and move forward that way. Imagine driving through the snow and then you're on an icy surface. Right? Traction is not going to help you on an icy surface. It'll help you in a snowpack. But on an icy surface and you're starting to slide, what happens? They tell you to turn into the slide, right? You're giving yourself a chance to correct, to get control once again. But then when you have traction and you got to dig in, you're literally digging into those snowbanks and moving forward. So very different scenarios here. What about impulse? We usually think about impulse as somebody doing something without much thought, very short period of time. And I will say that sometimes there is such a thing as being too late. That's a quote by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of my favorite quotes. So sometimes there is such a thing as being too late. And I do understand that there is a time dependence to many things. But oftentimes, you can achieve the same goal by doing little amounts in a longer period of time, rather than throwing all your energy out in a short period of time. There's always this give and take. It's worth at least thinking about. So when we look at plumbing, for instance, go through a home goods store, right? Go through Home Depot, Lowe's, something like that. And you take some PVC or CPVC pipe and you grab a joint and you seat it in there, and then you try to pull it back out. It won't work. These have already bonded on some small scale, right? It's already a tight fit. What you have to do is break those bonds first. So you grab it and you twist it first, you get it moving, you break the bonds, and then you pull out. The lesson here goes back to friction. Sometimes you have to move in a different direction in order to loosen life up and keep moving forward. Try it out yourself. The last thing I want to ask you on this is, what's your social grease? Sometimes life is just seized up and rusty. Your interactions with other people aren't working. You can't get your own internal gears moving. What's your social grease? Is it a smile? Do you have some type of personal health that you need to be taking on? Is there some kind of strategy that you can employ to improve your own emotions, the way that you relate to other people? What is your social grease? Listening to other people, being willing to do work. There's so many people out there that are really not willing to put themselves out there for either fear of failure. Maybe they don't believe that they can do it. Maybe they're lazy. There are lazy people out there, right? We can improve these things. I point my fingers back at myself. Look at your inefficiencies. Look at the areas that you need to improve on. Every one of us has fear. Every one of us has failed before. Every one of us has some amount of laziness in us that can be filtered out, right? That can be fixed and improved on. So what's your social grease? Improving yourself, improving your relationship with others. Sometimes it's a very simple thing. Again, just a smile. What do you do to keep things moving forward? And then very importantly, you got to be able to slow down, look back, analyze. How is it going? Am I going in the right direction? Do I need help from somebody? And then maybe even revise. So when talking about getting help from other people, sometimes you just got to bring extra ropes, right? You ever hear the saying, a 3 strand cord is hard to break, bring extra ropes. Don't try to do things on your own. Know your elastic limit before you break. You might feel stronger for a little bit of time because you're under this strain and you're like, oh, I'm doing a great job. Know your elastic limit. Enlist the help of other people. And very importantly, keep your cool. Give yourself time to cool down. Find some kind of coolant that will help you to not overheat, right? We talk about efficiency. We always have this production of thermal energy. It's a really wasteful process where low efficiency is involved. So find some way of air conditioning your goal setting and your goal achievement. All right. So here's Bob. Bob has a weight problem, and Bob's going to tackle that weight problem. Look, got very discrete goals that Bob's achieving here. And it worked pretty well. All right, but then life got in the way. Look what can happen. Priorities change, family changes, convenience issues, sicknesses. So instead, Bob needed a little help and enlisted a companion to move along with him in his weight loss goals. So Bob's on his way. So what about you? Choose a goal you have, develop a plan. Is it a social dilemma? What do you want to do? What do you want to change about yourself? I want you to write it down, think about it, put it somewhere that you can see it every morning and every night. In the morning, you say, how am I going to achieve this goal? At night, you say, what did I do to get there? Do I need to modify my plan? Keep moving forward. So a couple little pet topics here. Vector addition. I've got two students here. They both have a task, and they both have to get to the end of it. Student A gets there in two very simple mini tasks. No problem for them. Student B starts off a little slow. They move off in a certain direction, and then they kind of backtrack, and they're like, whoa, 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 I'm not sure that I'm doing this right. They seek help. They find a new resource. They have somebody moving along with them during one of the steps. And then they really get somewhere. Sure, it's a little bit in the wrong direction, but they're getting somewhere. And then they realize, oh, got to do a little course correction here. And they break up that final leg of the journey into two discrete tasks. So I ask you, who achieved their goal? Well, clearly both of them did. And for the sake of argument, let's say that they did it in time. Who got there faster? Well, sure, student A no doubt got there faster. But guess who learned more along the way? I'm supposing that student B is a lot more wiser from start to end than student A is. Student A knew what they were doing. They got along. They did fine, I'm sure. But student B found new resources, knew how to enlist the help of other people, realized that they needed to make course corrections along the way. Nothing's wasted here. Good job, student B. Great job, student A too. Achieve your goals. Don't be ashamed of having to pull out other resources, enlist the help of others, and definitely don't be ashamed of assessing where you're at and making course corrections, because if you're not doing that, forget about it. So what's the big idea of quantization, right? The whole point here is that energy, for instance, is transferred in little discrete packets, we'll call it. So my big advice to you is that when you have big goals or big tasks, do what Bob did. Divide them up into manageable, achievable tasks, subtasks, if you will. Tackle them that way. So that's quantization. Then we look at standing waves. Let's say that you're a rope and you're all agitated. You probably look something like this, right? Pretty disordered. But if you use the natural characteristics of a rope, maybe even enlist the help of somebody else, you can get into a harmonic pattern here. And you can form what's called a standing wave, which can be troublesome in engineering, but otherwise it's a nice, pretty demonstration in a physics classroom. Same rope, different setup. Which life do you want? Chaotic or organized? It takes more effort to make an organized rope work. It really does. And to sustain it, it really does. Try it out. Get a rope, get a friend. Get a rope, get a doorknob. Pull on it, wiggle it up and down. Try to get a standing wave pattern. It takes more effort, but I think you'll agree It's worth it. Now here's Bob. Bob's getting ready to karate chop this one little piece of lumber here. No problem. Bob's been doing this for a lot of years. Oh, but then we laminate these. We layer them. Let's just say, for sake of argument, we've glued them together somehow. Maybe even we cross-laminated them if you're interested in engineering materials. It's a lot harder to break all of these boards together than one single board alone. And this is a big materials product here, big wood product here is lamination. The whole point is that why try to tackle life? Why try to bear a load as a single board when you can enlist the help of others and work together as a team? I've found that that's the way it is moving forward. You're always achieving goals with the help of others. You might be involved in little tasks yourself, but if you try to go it alone, again, forget about it. So if you want to reach out to me, here's my email address. I'd be glad to respond to you. And I want to thank you for joining me.